All righty. Good afternoon. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is almost that time. We are right there. We're on the edge of getting ready for our EOC for biology. So, the purpose of this video is to walk you through how to use the testing site, how to use the different tools, and how to use it to your advantage to help you score the highest on your biology EOC. Remember, the goal is to have to only take it one time and not have to deal with it next year. So we're gonna do amazing. We're gonna rock this test. We're gonna kill it. And then guess what? We won't have to worry about a biology EOC ever again. So follow along with me. I'm going to walk you through this, and then hopefully later in class or on your own time, you have the link. You'll be able to play with the practice site. So what we're going to do is I'm going to load up the test here. So this is actually the star test from last year that was released. And here are the questions. This is similar to what you should see when you're going through the test as far as the layout of the different tools. And I just want to walk you through on how to use this, and then B, how to use the different tools and strategies we can use. Because it's one thing to know content and know all the topics and what words mean and the content, but it's another thing to have a strategy. So the first strategy I want to talk about is marking your test for review. So let's say I get to this question. I really don't know what it is, right? My first strategy anytime I take a test is I'm going to go through the entire test. Now, this practice site is a little bit different, but typically would have question numbers here at the top. My first thing is I'm going through the test and I'm just going to read all the questions. I want to get an idea of what the questions are. So it may tell me a little message that says I haven't answered a question. That's okay because I'm not going to submit anything. But again, I want to look through these questions beforehand before I get started and kind of get an idea of what I know, what I don't know, right? So again, that is my first strategy. The second thing is if you see something that you really don't know, that you like, ooh, I know this is going to give me a hard time, there's two things I would do. The first one is I'm going to hit this drop down menu and I am going to mark that for review. What that does, it flags that question. So then I know, hey, I need to come back to this question before I submit and look at it again one more time. My goal taking tests, I'm going to save the harder questions for last. I'm going to knock out all the easy stuff, the things that I know right away that I can answer. I'm going to do those first, and then I'm going to come back to these harder type questions. So we're going to try to walk through at least 5 questions together. So if I look at this first question, it says some adaptations of 2 species of salamanders are shown in the table below. So I get my table. Again, they love putting tables, graphics, things for you to use. So I look at this. All right, we have this type of salamander versus this type of salamander. This is what it looks like. Here's the adaptation or the things that would help it in its environment. We have gills and a fin, and then we have lungs and stout legs. So before I look at any answer choices, I just want to read the question. And the question says, which statement best compares the areas where the axolotl and the tiger salamanders live based on their adaptations? One cool feature that you may not know you could use is the notepad feature. Now, in addition to the notepad feature, you also have scratch paper that will be provided to you on the day of the test. But the notepad feature is kind of cool if you have messy handwriting or if you don't feel like doing it, you can just put your notes here. So I'm gonna come here, make a little note to myself. Well, the question is asking about their adaptations. So one has gills and a fin. And I start thinking about, well, what else has gills and fins? If you have gills and fins, fish normally do. They're normally going to be underwater. So I know that the axolotl is going to be around some type of body of water. It's going to be underwater because it has gills. And then the second adaptation for the tiger salamander says lungs. Well, who has lungs? Who else has lungs? What other type of animals? Oh, humans. We have lungs. Lungs are for breathing. And then stout legs. Legs are for walking. So I'm going to just make those notes to myself. Now, what I have done is what's called a brain dump. A brain dump is where you just typically you just dump all this type of information onto your notes. Just dump everything that's in your brain onto your notes. So then as you look at your notes, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that makes sense. That could be the correct answer. So we know an adaptation, it is something that helps an organism survive. We're just going to put that. That's what I remember from adaptations. And then I know gills and fin help with breathing underwater. So I'll make a little note to myself. Gills and fin, breathing underwater. Lungs, helpful for breathing on land. Legs, again, for walking on land. That's all I'm going to do. All right, now that I have that, now I'm just going to look at my answer choices and my answer choices, so I can hit save and close that. And that's always going to be for me to refer. And if I wanted to leave it up, you can make it smaller. You can move it around. You can make it bigger. You can still have it up and scroll. So I know the axolotl has the gills. So let's just start looking at my answer choices. And then my favorite strategy, eliminate answer choices that are wrong. So this first answer choice said the axolotl live on land near fresh water. Well, I've already said that adaptations that would help an organism live on land would be walking. The axolotl don't have any legs, so they wouldn't really be able to survive on land. So I know that can't be a correct answer. And remember, both statements about both salamanders has to be true, right? It can't be, well, this one's true, but that one's false. Both statements have to be true. So I'm going to go ahead and cross this out, because if I right click on this, it gives me the option that I can strike through. And then same thing here. This one says axolotl salamanders live in trees and the tiger salamanders live in caves. Again, the tiger salamanders, that could be a true statement. Its caves are on land. They have lungs and stout legs. They could possibly do that. But it also says the axolotl lives in trees. Well, their adaptation, the gills and the fin, really don't help it do anything in a tree. They wouldn't be able to survive there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that through. So now I have two answer choices left. Again, I've always taught and I always told my students this year, a lot of these times you can just process of elimination and get to the right answer. Even if we wanted to look at C, C says the axolotls live in caves, the tiger salamanders live in trees. Again, we've already stated before that we know axolotls can't live on land because they don't have adaptations that would help them live on land. So I can even mark through that. And I only have one right answer, or one answer choice left. There has to be a right answer. It says the axolotl salamanders live in lakes, and then the tiger salamanders live on land near fresh water. That would be a true statement because they live on land. they have legs, they have lungs to help them breathe on land. And then the axolotl lives in lakes. Well, they have gills and fins. The gills would help them breathe. The fins would help with movement in the water. So I'm making that note. Boom, movement in the water. The correct answer would be D. So I'm going to save and close that. And then I'm going to move on to my next question. Now, previously I'd marked this question for review. If you wanted to change your mind, like, hey, I get it now, I'm going to unmark it so it's not marked for review. Let's look at our next question. Again, another diagram. This says this diagram represents a cellular process. The question is asking which molecule is a direct product of this cell process. Two parts, the way I would approach this question. First, what is this process? Well, here's a hint. If we're looking at a product, so I'm going to go here, go to my notes. Now there's a feature where you could do sticky notes. I'm not sure how different that is than Notepad, but you can use that as well. But I'm going to go back to my Notepad, and it's asking about a product, right? What comes out? So the question mark is what we're trying to answer. Well, if I know, let me get this out of here. This side is what comes out. We're looking at what goes in. We have CO2, light, and H2O. Well, I know this process is, so I'm going to make a little note to myself for number 2. The process is photosynthesis. Well, how do we know that? Couple ways. Light energy going into something, into a cell process. Plants need light, need sunlight in order to do photosynthesis. That is a giveaway. We also need CO2 and water. So now I go to my answer choices. So we're looking at what's a direct product, what comes out of this. So I'm going to make my note here. What comes out of photosynthesis? Right? Well, before I look at any answer choices, man, what comes out of photosynthesis? All right, what is it? What is it? What is it? Oh, okay, cool. Plants make oxygen for us to breathe. And they give us glucose. Those are 2 things we get, right? So now I'll look at my answer choices. Looking at this diagram, I've already been given O2, which is oxygen. So the only answer choice left for me is glucose. I'll look and make sure, and boom, glucose, right? Again, eliminate stuff that doesn't make sense. Don't spend your time looking at 4 answer choices trying to guess. Just use the information that's given. They're giving you the chance to get the right answer. Again, these other 3 choices, phospholipid doesn't make sense. Insulin doesn't make sense. And we definitely don't get DNA out. So my last choice is glucose. Let us look at one more question here. Now, this one, we are looking at a food web. And this is my favorite type of question. It's a short constructed response. Now, they're going to always give you directions. Make sure you read the directions carefully on how to answer the short constructed response. So we're looking at our food web. The question is identify and explain one effect that the removal of mice would have on the food web. So if I wanted to highlight key information, I'm just going to take my mouse here and I'm going to highlight it, and I can come up here and I'm going to highlight this section. Boom, right? And I'm going to come here. The part of the direction says identify and explain one effect of, I'm going to do it in 2 different colors. That's just me. All right. So It says, identify and explain one effect that the removal of mice would have on the food web. Anytime you answer a short constructed response, there are a couple different ways that you can do it. The surefire way to do it, if you want to make sure you get the max amount credit, is use part of this sentence in your response. So, what does that mean? I would say, well, I would start my sentence or my response by saying, if the mice were removed from this food web, then, and then we'll enter in our answer. What you've already done is you've identified the effect, and then you're going to explain it. So let's look at our food web, right? So as we've learned this year and looking at food webs, and we've kind of built on our previous knowledge from 7th and 8th grade, these arrows represents who eats what, right? So if I'm looking at this, the mice eat the grass, rabbits eat grass, grasshoppers eat grass, and then the snakes eat mice, and the hawks also eat mice. So, what are some things that we think would happen? So, if we say mice were no longer here, what would happen? So, for me, in this answer choice, I am going to say that in this scenario, if mice were removed, and I only have to explain one effect, that it would be less food for the snakes. The snakes would actually lose their only source of food because the snakes only eat the mice. So then I come here. I already have this part typed out. Then the snakes would lose their only source of food. And if we wanted to explain what effect it would have on the food web, well, we've already identified the snakes would lose their only source of food, and we could add in that also if snakes lost their only source of food, that you could also add in it, there would be one less food source for the hawk. But I mean, you've pretty much sufficiently answered the question. So you've put in here, if the mice were removed from this food web, these snakes would lose their only source of food. There we go. And if the snakes would lose their only source of food, you can add that. If we wanted to add more, that snakes would eventually become or would eventually be removed from this food web. That's just one way you could answer it. But you've identified and you explain the effect, because if mice were removed, then snakes would lose their only source of food. We identified and then we explained that snakes would eventually be removed from this food web because of the lack snakes would eventually be removed from this food web because of the lack of food. Because based on this food web, it only shows me that snakes eat the mice. And that's it. That's how we solve that question. Now, you can also do bullet points. But for me, I feel like the easiest way to do it is always kind of reword part of the question in your response and then add in your answer. So that's done. And then let's find a tough one. All right. So This one's a little tougher, right? Again, diagrams, diagrams, diagrams. Look at the diagram, seeing what it's showing you. So I have two chromosomes. I have chromosome A and chromosome B. Well, in this first part of the diagram, they are together. And then I see here that they break apart. And then the arrow shows that they're going to just switch places. Well, and now they end up like this. So then, again, we're going process of elimination. If I'm looking at this, was any part, and the question is asking us what type of mutation is shown. So we have our four answer choices. Well, if I'm looking at this, was any part of this chromosome removed or deleted or not there anymore? If I look at my picture, they're still the same size. Nothing got, this here didn't show anything being deleted. So I'm just going to strike that through because that can't be right. Did we add in an extra piece? They swapped, but we didn't just add in a piece. So I'm going to go here, strike that through. My next one, duplication. Man, what does duplication mean? So I come here to my notepad, just make a note to myself, man, duplicate. What does that mean? Duplication. I think it means like a copy. So I'm just going to put a copy here. Well, if I'm looking at my notes, I've made a note that says a copy. Well, did we make a copy? Is that what the picture is showing? Nope, it's not showing a copy. Again, I know for certain it can't be those three. There's only one answer choice left. And then I go with D, translocation. And that's how I would approach every question. You know, aside from the basic things we say, of course, take your time, read each question through. But those are the things that I would. These are the tips or strategies I would use. Use the resources that have been given to you. Use the different tools, the notepads. Even if you don't think you know it or you think you need it, use it. Use the sticky note feature. Find some way to kind of get your thoughts out in front of you so you can look at something and say, okay, I just typed that out right now. I know that's not right. That doesn't make sense. That can't be an answer. Like, use that to your advantage. I guarantee you, if you do that, that your scores are going to be extremely. You have a better chance of having higher scores than if you chose not to do that at all. So that's been my time here. We'll work on more of that later, but hopefully this video has been helpful for you, and I will see you when I see you. Peace.